No. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. All right, it is 1 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. For those that don't know me, my name is Colleen Cook. I am the pre-treatment team leader here at TCEQ. Again, thank you for making the trip to be here in person. I want to start off with just a few housekeeping items that it would be good for us all to be familiar with as we go through the meeting. We are being live streamed right now to our agency's YouTube channel. So that being said, if you have a question throughout any of the agenda discussion items, I'm going to ask you to just raise your hand. You can walk up to the podium. Please ask your question into the microphone so everyone online can hear you. If you are joining us virtually, welcome. If you have a question, you can submit it to our outreach email address. That's outreach@tceq.texas.gov. It should be up on your screen. Can we share the presentation slides, please? Let's see. All right, there it is. So if you are attending virtually, go ahead and jot that email address down now in case you have any questions in real time. Abby is going to be helping us field those questions online, and we'll try and answer them in real time as well. Before we go any further, I would like to introduce the full team to you guys. I'll just start right here. We have Ms. Jessica Alcazer, Ms. Bridget Malone, Dr. Erin Darling. Then over here on this side, we have Mr. Devin Thomas, Ms. Sarah O'Neill, Ms. Amy Golden-Letty, and Ms. Jo Hunsberger. So this is your central office pre-treatment team. Amy, if you wouldn't mind hitting the next slide so everybody can see our agenda for the afternoon. You should have gotten this in an email if you are signed up on our outreach email. So in the meeting this afternoon, we're going to hit on a couple of different topics that are relevant to our program. Bridget and I are going to be sharing some updates on our auditing process as well as just some program implementation updates. And then we're going to hand it over to Jessica to review some regulatory updates that we should all be familiar with. We encourage questions, like I mentioned. We're going to have, time and space after most of the agenda items. If you have any questions, comments, concerns that you would like to share with us, we really want this to be an open dialogue. Of course, we want to share information with you guys and be transparent about what's going on behind the scenes, but we're also interested in hearing from you and any issues or concerns that y'all are facing, on the programmatic level. So with that being said, we'll also have plenty of time at the end to, hit on any other discussion topics that anyone may want to touch on or expand on any of the items discussed, during the meeting. Okay, so let's dive right in, you guys, into some program implementation updates. So first, we're going to talk about the auditing process. Our 2024 audit season is well underway. We're still implementing that hybrid audit process that we started last year. Just a little background, our team is responsible for auditing 75 approved pretreatment programs in the state of Texas once every 5 years. So it is a very large undertaking and something that we take very seriously as your approval authority. That being said, most of our programs have yet to be audited under this new hybrid audit stance. So I wanted to quickly highlight just the major updates to the process that you would want to be familiar with. First, we are now doing electronic file reviews pre-audit. So when we announce that we're coming out to audit you, we're also going to request those industrial user files at that time so we can complete that user file review prior to the audit week. This is going to allow us to have a bigger scope of the industrial user documents reviewed and also give us more time during the audit week to continue discussion of items that we may have flagged during pre-audit review. The second big item is now we will have both in-person, on-site portions of the audit, as well as a remote exit meeting. So we will have, like we always have, we'll come on site, do the initial interview, any industrial user site visits. So that'll be the first half of the week. Then the second half of the week, we finish that up remotely. We have an exit interview through Microsoft Teams. So that pretty much covers the main updates to our process. We've been implementing this for close to 18 months now. It seemed to work really well. Our control authorities seem to have adapted and like the hybrid audit stance. But we are interested in hearing any feedback from you guys, if anyone has been audited recently under the new stance, or if anyone has any questions or feedback. We would love to hear it. Or anything in regards to audits. Yes, Peter.
Hi, Peter Reale here. So I understand that there's an in-person part and then there's a file review remote portion. Is there dialogue during that remote portion, and what does that back and forth communication look like if y'all are off-site?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. We try and limit that dialogue before the audit week. So if we are doing our industrial user file review and we notice if there's something majorly deficient, we ask for a permit application, it's not there, we'll give you a heads up. Hey, you didn't submit that. In regards to, the technical review of, maybe the data or whatever, we're going to save those conversations for the audit week, just like they always have been. We're just going to get started kind of with a leg up because, we've already reviewed all the documents and we can kind of hit the ground running with our questions.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. Does anybody have anything else? Okay, no news is good news. That's my motto. Okay. Moving on to routine monitoring data for technically based local limits redevelopment. Most of you may have heard we've presented on this before. As of, I think it was early last year, TCEQ will now be accepting routine monitoring data in lieu of or in addition to that 7 consecutive day sampling event for those TBLL redevelopments. However, that being said, the data has to meet a certain standard in order to be accepted and used in those calculations. The most important criteria being that the data has to be representative of current operations at the plant, right? During the time frame that you want to use. So conditions at the facility should have remained consistent throughout that time frame associated with the data that you're using. So it is important that, if you're considering redevelopment and you think that routine monitoring data makes the most sense for you, please reach out to us, as soon as you kind of start having those conversations so we can talk you through, anything prior to submission that may come up. We want to make sure that our control authorities are clear on all of the expectations, before we get a TBLL plan submitted. So I'm not going to get into any more of the details of that data. I'm going to kind of leave it high level. But if anyone had any questions on the data required for these redevelopments, it is consistent with that 2004 EPA development guidance. Okay. Moving right along. Okay, now I just kind of want to provide you guys an update, a status update on our new developing program, substantial modifications, and then the TPDES permit action that is required for these final approvals. So in regards to new developing programs, last year we were able to tech complete the City of Kilgore's new developing program. And we are also very close to tech completing the City of Taylor's new developing program. So that just leaves 5 remaining new developing programs that we'll need to review and approve. But having 2 tech completed almost is is a major progress for those. So we're really proud of the work that we've been able to do over the last 12 months, and we hope that the momentum will continue into 2024. Another main initiative of ours over the last few years has been to tech completing our pending substantial modifications for both the streamlining rule and technically based local limits. So after tech completion, as stated in 40 CFR 403.18, substantial modifications must be incorporated into the POTW's NPDES permit upon approval. So our team has been working to initiate those permit actions needed for the tech completed modifications as well as the new developing programs. So getting your modification tech complete is kind of like the first big step, and then the second big step is the permit action process needed for that final incorporation and approval. So let's see. Amy, could you go back one slide, please? There we go. I just wanted to touch on this really quick before moving on. If looking at the chart, you can see over 2/3 of the modifications have been incorporated via a TPDES permit action or are currently in process or the permitting process. And that leaves only 8 that we have pending. So again, we've made a lot of progress over the last couple of years, and I think this year will be no different, and we'll be in a really good spot. I keep saying I want to take our pretreatment program into the future, and I think one of the first big steps in doing that is getting in a good spot with these pending past modifications and new developing programs. Okay, so now let's take a look at that TPDES permit process for approval. As we've been discussing, so kind of that last step and substantial modification approval or new developing program approval involves updating a program's TPDES permit to incorporate the modification into the pretreatment language of your permit. So substantial modifications, so they can be incorporated into a TPDES permit in 2 different ways. So either via a staff-initiated amendment or in conjunction with the next TPDES permit action and what we call a dovetail permit. So that's all going to kind of depend on when during your permit cycle you tech complete your substantial modification. So if you have a permit that's in-house, you can just dovetail that approval with your in-house TPDES permit. If it's going to be several years, then we're going to, okay, it's tech completed, we want to go ahead and get it into the permit, let's do a staff-initiated amendment. So again, after tech completion and you have submitted the City Council approved final version of the program to TCEQ for review, the pretreatment team will initiate a permit action to officially incorporate those changes via either a staff-initiated amendment or a dovetail permit. I did want to just take a minute to just walk through that general process. I know, for a lot of our programs, several years can go in between when a major substantial modification or TBLL redevelopment is required. So this process can get a little bit fuzzy. So I did want to just, walk through high level what that process looks like once you get to the tech completion portion of a submod review. I think that about covers it. Did anybody have any general questions about how the tech completing of the substantial modification relates to the TPDES permit action? Okay, and we'll be posting our slides and all of our notes online too. So if this happens down the road and you're like, man, what did Colleen say about that process? All of this information will be online, and then, of course, you can always reach out to us as well. Okay, that covers what I had for you this afternoon, so I'm going to kick it over to Bridget to highlight some administrative items.
Awesome. Thank you, Colleen. So kind of piggybacking off of what she finished with, as far as the tech completed substantial modifications, so as far as those final document submittals, We are kind of, as you know, updating our process, moving to digitization, stuff like that, and keeping in line with the agency's paper reduction efforts. We now are accepting digital copies of submittals in addition to the hard copies with the wet signatures. So when submitting those final tech complete substantial modification packages for approval, please only submit 2 hard copies and 1 digital copy. We no longer require 4 hard copies. I know that was previously noted in the notification letters that we sent out, but we no longer need 4 hard copies, just 2 hard copies and that 1 digital. It will make our review a lot easier, and I think it's a lot easier on the CAs to not have to submit all that paperwork. And so again, this will also be outlined in those tech complete letters. Yes.
Hi, Brooke Nowak. So I have a question. It has to do with, so if you guys do a staff initiated, do we have to submit all the application and all the paperwork plus, the submittal you're talking about, the program?
That's a different process. So the staff initiated is different than if we tech complete it and then we're saying submit the program to us, we would still need a full copy of the program to initiate that
Yeah, I'm
permit
saying
process.
The permit application, is there? any
No.
requirement?
No.
So there's no like the NORI
It's like
and
a
all this?
request. We ask for
Okay.
a request from you guys to open up the permit to do the staff initiated amendment.
Okay,
Correct.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brooke. So again, if we do have that final tech complete notification from us and we're asking for that final program submittal, just the 2 hard copies. For everything else you submit, non-substantial modification request, annual reports, any other notification or correspondence, we just require 1 hard copy. You can submit a digital copy concurrently with the hard copy, but only 1 hard copy is required. So again, the best way to get these digital copies to us would be via email. If the files are really large, you can compress them in a zip file. If you have the resources and have OneDrive, SharePoint, any sort of shared data files, we can accept those as well. And then again, if there is an issue with large files, the agency still does have a secure file transfer that we can utilize as well. And so this is usually with like laboratory reports, big items like that. But again, feel free to reach out to us about any of these submittals just to make sure we're getting what we need and we're not having all these redundancies as well. Next up, I'm going to talk about modification notifications. So pretreatment team now requires mandatory pre-application meetings or notifications on all non-substantial and substantial requests. This process was established to ensure that all the appropriate information is included in the modification. It also kind of provides a framework for open communication between our staff and the CAs, and it will help us, do more efficient and timely technical reviews. So please contact us if you do plan on submitting a either non-substantial or substantial request so that we can kind of have that open-ended discussion, see what needs to be submitted, so that when it comes in, we have a full, complete package that we can just start working on. And they don't have to be meetings. They can be online. We're not asking y'all to come in, but definitely let Colleen give her a heads up whenever you are about to submit some sort of modification. Moving on to text talks reports. This is a pretty big change we've implemented recently. Typically, y'all come to us once a year, ask for updated text talks reports. We did find some redundancies in our internal processes, so we're now asking RCAs to go ahead and utilize the text talks reports that are generated during the most recent permit action for annual reports. So typically during the permit, usually a renewal, the permittee is asked to comment on the draft permit package. So an updated text talks report should be included in that. So if you have access to that, go ahead and use that for your annual report submittals. Those will be good for the duration of the permit. If you're having problems finding that, you can reach out to us, but we will just be providing the one that was most recently generated during that permit action. If you are planning to conduct a TBLL study or redevelopment, however, you will need to request a new text talks because we do want the most recent numbers, for those calculations. But as far as your annual report submittals, they should be good for 5 years or however long that TPDES permit is good for your program. Last little update, the Region 6 pretreatment workshop. So the EPA Region 6 Pretreatment Association workshop and conference will be held again in Denton. This is the last year it will be in Denton. I believe it's moving out of state next year. So we highly recommend if you are able to attend that. It's a really good resource for pretreatment knowledge and training and stuff like that. The dates are going to be July 23rd through the 26th, 2024. And the board is currently requesting and accepting abstract submittals from speakers looking to present. So you can find more information on their website or reach out to us. And we are just asking y'all to please, please, please submit an abstract. We would love to hear from y'all. Texas has a ton of knowledge, ton of good speakers, a ton of experts in their fields, and we know y'all want to share that with us. So please don't be bashful, submit an abstract. So does anyone have any questions on these updates before we move on to regulatory updates?
All right. Thanks, Bridget. I will be discussing a few regulatory updates, first covering PFAS and specifically items pertaining to wastewater. So back in December of 2022, EPA released the NPDES PFAS state memo, which provided guidance on NPDES state permitting programs and as well POTWs for the first steps on how to move forward, including how POTWs could establish their universe, develop sampling plans, and utilize BMPs to address those PFAS discharges. ELG Plan 15 was then released in January of 2023, and that also included the plan for setting standards for industries that discharge PFAS, including OCPSF manufacturers, metal finishers, and landfills. A main item included in ELG Plan 15 that has recently gained some traction is the EPA's POTW Influent PFAS study. So recently, EPA did notify state authorities that this study will be done as a information collection request under the Clean Water Act and will require participation from selected POTWs across the country. The first part of the study will include an electronic questionnaire, which will be sent to 400 of the largest POTWs in the country. Not all POTWs participating in the questionnaire, though, will be automatically involved in the sampling and analysis portion of the study. If selected, EPA will be providing further details and sampling plans to the POTWs with detailed information on what is required. And there will be 2 rounds of public comment for stakeholder input and feedback. So that is the information we have so far in regards to that national study that EPA will be doing. Then more recently, in December of 2023, EPA did also release their second annual progress report. This report included updates on all of their various action items, including drinking water, wastewater, waste, solid waste. We really encourage our control authorities to read through that progress report to make sure they're keeping current with EPA initiatives. The 2 main takeaways for wastewater is EPA and the DoD, Department of Defense, are in the final stages of validating EPA Method 1633, and they do intend to start the rulemaking process in 2024 to officially incorporate Method 1633 into the Clean Water Act. And then EPA is still continuing to develop rules under the ELG program to revise or create limits for PFAS discharges from those manufacturers we talked about, metal finishers and landfills. Unfortunately, though, the progress report didn't include any additional details as far as that rulemaking revision, so we don't have more information related to that. Before I move on, are there any questions on those PFAS updates? Okay, awesome. So moving on, EPA also...
I did get a couple questions
Yeah.
online. So 2 questions from Cassandra. I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Excuse me if I butcher it. Villarreal. For TBLL redevelopment, is a sampling plan for collection system sampling required? And the second question is dental rule for a new developing program. What are the expectations in implementing the dental rule after TCEQ approves the IPP? Repeat it? Yeah. Okay. So the first question is for TBLL redevelopment, is a sampling plan for collection system sampling required? And the second question is dental rule for a new developing program. What are the expectations in implementing the dental rule after TCEQ approves the IPP?
So sampling plans are not technically required by federal regulation, but we do recommend them so that we have the chance to review your proposed sampling plan, where you're going to sample, how much data you're going to use, things of that nature. If there is not a sampling plan submitted and you jump straight to the TBLL development package, if we were to identify something that was not done in accordance with federal requirements or things need to be resampled, there would kind of have to be some going back on that. So just keep that in mind. Sampling plans are done to kind of address any concerns on the front end and make it very clear what needs to be done for the TBLL study. And then, do you want to take the dental?
Yeah, regarding the dental form and the dental rule, so that will all be addressed in the program review. So we will review the one-time compliance report form and make sure that we have all of the elements that we need there. And then, the process for doing the industrial waste survey for your dental users and how you're keeping up with that, along with your industrial waste survey for, your other industrial users. Bridget, Jessica, anything else? No.
I will just add for the dental rule, the main takeaway is to identify who's out there. You should have submitted that compliance report form and received it back. Past that, that's kind of, the threshold that we are looking for implementation of that rule.
Okay, any PFAS questions? Oh, yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me? Regarding the PFAS, you had said that 400 of the largest POTWs are going to be contacted, and they will do for the influent. Is that correct?
So our understanding right now, the study is for influent. 400 will be sent to the questionnaire, but from there, depending on the questionnaire responses, what the POTW responds to them, then they will select certain POTWs to actually do the sampling to require the influent samples.
Okay, will that be before the 1633 is codified or during the process of that?
The timing's still not exactly 100%, but if 1633 hasn't been codified and isn't fully approved, 1633 is what EPA is recommending.
Okay.
That method that you use.
Yes, right now EPA has stated that they are recommending method 1633 to be used for, wastewater, NIPDES permitting.
There was also one called 1651, I believe. I'm not quite sure. There was another one as well on the wastewater.
Right, I think it's 1621 maybe. But I think there is another method that is, and we can get some information for you, but that one's supposed to be a more broad method to detect a general presence, and then 1633 is a little bit more specific to 40 specific PFAS. Yeah.
Any other questions on PFAS before we move on?
All right. So EPA also recently released the proposed rule revisions for meat and poultry facilities, and these will be applicable to facilities subject to 40 CFR 432, the meat and poultry category. The proposed rule was released on December 15th of 2023 and is right now within the 60-day public comment period. EPA is accepting public comments and is also holding 2 public hearings this month. One is on January 24th and January 31st. The hearing next week on the 24th is completely virtual, so we do recommend our CAs who are interested to attend if possible, and registration can be found on the link provided in the slide. The proposed rule for meat and poultry does contain 3 options right now. EPA does designate one as their preferred option, option 1, and this will include phosphorus limits and more stringent nitrogen limits for direct dischargers. And this option will establish for the very first time pretreatment standards for indirect dischargers. Under the preferred option 1, pretreatment standards for existing and new sources will include new conventional pollutant limits for BOD, TSS, and oil and grease, specifically for large facilities though. They do include a threshold in their proposed rule. This visual here does outline the other proposed options, options 2 and 3. They are more expansive, and so they expand the number of facilities that they're applicable to, as well as the subcategories. And then as well, option 2 and 3 do add nitrogen and phosphorus limits for indirect dischargers. So this visual aid is in the proposed rule, which you can find online. I also have a few handouts here in case anyone wants one. EPA, like I said, is requesting public comment on all 3 options, as well as a few additional provisions, one of which being that they're also pursuing possibly the requirement to segregation and management of high salt waste streams at these meat and poultry facilities. So that's what we have right now on the proposed rule, and I'll be listening in next week and hopefully see what other public feedback EPA gets. Are there any questions, comments on the proposed rule? All right, thanks.
Awesome, thanks, Jessica. One final regulatory update. So final implementation of the e-reporting rule will be December 21st, 2025. So a little over a year, about 2 years. You should have received a waiver in the mail since the initial deadline was back in 2020. But if not, the 2025 date is the final deadline. So kind of regardless what your TPDES permit states, that is the final day. So pretreatment team has been attending the weekly e-reporting calls with the EPA and sitting in to see how that development is going. EPA Region 8 was kind of the first guinea pig to dive into that. They actually developed most of the database, and they are expected to go live, I think, tomorrow, if not next week. So they're actually going to start accepting their annual reports in this database. So other regions are in line to work with the EPA next, and the earliest TCEQ is looking at getting in that schedule would be next or this fall, so September 2024, kind of depending how it goes. And so the whole process to kind of look at that development, customize the database can take, 6 months or more. So on that note, when it does come time for us to be more heavily involved with that development, we will be reaching out to CAs, looking for volunteers, kind of for that beta testing part of it. We want to see how it works for y'all. Any sort of bugs coming up, we can talk with EPA directly, kind of get it customized to what our state and region needs. So if you are interested in volunteering, feel free to reach out to us. If not, you may hear from us in the fall, just requesting some volunteers, especially from our bigger programs. And this will just help, guarantee that what they build kind of meets specifications for what we want, and will guarantee that we can easily implement the e-reporting requirements effectively. Do you have any questions on e-reporting? Yes, sir.
David James, and what is the thinking, the current thinking of TCEQ for that full pretreatment program to be inputting the data directly into the database?
Oh, you have to, sorry, turn the mic on.
please?
Yeah, David James. Oh, sorry. So what's the current TCEQ thinking in terms of submitting data? Is it going to be directly into the EPA database that gets developed? or-
Correct. Like the CAs will have authorization through their signatory, and they will be submitting, basically what you submit in the annual report will now just be input, kind of like the DMRs are.
Yeah.
So they'll be responsible for inputting that data directly into the EPA database. And then we would be able to generate, reports out of that.
What's the current, my second question is, what's the current thinking in terms of submitting all the influent and effluent sampling? I remember when I was involved with early stages back when I was with TCEQ, that was something that had not been resolved at that time. And so, has
Like
there been
inputting
any-
the monitoring
Yeah, all the
results?
monitoring stuff, the quarterly, semi-annual monitoring of the influent and effluent data that's part of the pretreatment requirements.
So this would just be for the annual report requirements, not any sort of, you're not talking about industrial anything, right?
No, I'm talking about like the POTWs so you've got the industries that submit their their semi-annual report data with, but then another part was the states submitting their annual reports to EPA through the system.
It's my understanding that in December 2025 is going to be the annual reports required by the TPDES permit. So the permittee or CA would be inputting all those monitoring results, enforcement actions you've taken on industrial users, everything, all those tables that we require in the permit will be submitted electronically.
Okay.
There's
so-
a separate database that's going to be built for SIUs outside of approved programs as well that they're
Okay,
working on.
So, yeah, there was talk about the influent and effluent testing files that's done by the POTWs, that those would probably be submitted as attachments.
Like their laboratory analysis?
Yeah.
So that's part of the development, so we can decide, like, I'm not sure what it looks like now. I haven't really done a lot of beta testing with it, but there are parts in the database that if we want people to submit a document, we can have them add a place to upload that information.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
So this is actually a different topic, but related. I spoke to some software companies about Chromair, and they made it seem that y'all would be approving off-the-shelf software Chromair solutions. Is that how that approval will go, and has there been any approvals like that?
I have not heard of this. This database is through EPA, and so everything EPA does is Chromair compliant because they built it to meet those requirements. So as far as any other type of database software, I haven't heard of anything.
As far as programs, though, have you approved any?
We have not approved any programs to be Chromair compliant. I am aware of at least one program who is working with EPA to get compliant. Regarding the program that's being used, I'm not sure of like the latitude there. If they just would have to meet certain requirements, the EPA, or
Have you had software companies approach you and submit for approval in that way?
no.
Okay.
No, and I think that is between EPA and the program. So we wouldn't be involved in that. Like if the software is approved as a Chromair compliant software, then it would be available, but like we wouldn't have,
We're not doing that.
we're not
approval.
involved in those decisions with like what's Chromair compliant and what's not.
Okay, thank you.
Can you guys hear me? All right, Daniel Potel. I have a quick question regarding the EPA system, if you happen to know. Is it going to be similar to the delegation of authority for net DMR? And would we have to establish that, I guess, with this new system? Because the people that submit our annual reports for pretreatment are different than, the people that do net DMR submissions.
Yeah, and that was a big discussion at the beginning, is getting that authorization, how they can verify signatories change, all that type of stuff. So yeah, that is definitely a part. It's similar. It does go into the net system. There's going to be a lot of similarities there.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, and we'll definitely keep y'all posted on, like Bridget said, earliest we'll start beta testing this would be this fall, but we'll definitely keep everyone posted because we want to get y'all's feedback during the process, especially if you're a bigger program and you have a lot to submit, maybe nuances that would affect you that may not affect the majority of the programs. Those are the things that we need to know and that Bridget will need to know so we can share that feedback. So the platform that we end up with is as user-friendly for you guys as possible. All right. That wraps up, guys, what we had on the agenda that we wanted to share with you and provide updates on. We have plenty of time if anyone had any additional questions or topics for discussion. Yes.
Is still on?
See him.
It's green. I meant to come up earlier when the question regarding the audit. These are shy people here. Audits used to be terrifying for a lot of organizations, and from what I hear from my clients and my contacts, it's hugely different. So I think the pretreatment community really appreciates that. Audits can be very important. Some programs, my clients' programs, they're all running perfectly. They don't really need to be audited, but I guess by law they need. But some programs need to be audited, benefited from it. So I want to make sure you know that it's appreciated, that it's not the hammer and scary thing. And the 4-week warning is really appreciated as well.
Thank you.
You mentioned something about bringing this program into the future, or leading it into the future. Of course, the pretreatment group has sent some letters, and we have some hopes and dreams and ideas for what it should be in the future, what could be improved. Can you tell me where there are overlaps in your vision of the future, and what you would like to happen, or how you want to get there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, I appreciate your feedback, Chris. I really do. We work really hard on auditing our programs. We want y'all to have the tools that you need to implement your programs. And, I think our perspective is we want to be able to help you guys do that. So thank you for that. Yeah, my comment on bringing the program into the future is just simply, like when I came onto this team, we had, some significant backlogs, due to the streamlining role and the fact that we have 75 approved programs, the most in the country. It's a big, big undertaking. So I think the first thing that we have to do is get through that backlog of substantial modifications and new developing programs and complete those permit actions. My goal, and one of the reasons why I wanted to go through the TPDES permitting process that's needed for those final approval with you guys this afternoon, is, as some of you who've been through this process recently know, it's kind of segregated into two separate reviews, right? You have the technical review of your substantial modification. We finally get it tech complete. You submit your final program, and depending on our workload and all of the other backlog, it may sit before we can actually do that permit action to complete, the circle. What I want is for us to be in a place where that process is one continuous approval process, right? We get it tech complete, you guys go to council, you come back, give it to us, and then we're immediately able to either dovetail the approval or initiate that permit action. So that's really, I feel like if we're able to do all of that in real time, it makes y'all's life easier. You're not waiting on us for anything. There's no gray area on, what should I be doing? Am I waiting on TCEQ? So if we can get to that one continuous process, I think that everything will run more efficiently in the program, especially now that we have this hybrid audit process that seems to really be working well. I think our resources are allocated in a way that we're able to really take a look at y'all's programs, provide some good feedback, but also, not spend an absorbent amount of time that maybe isn't necessary. So kind of finding that balance, and that's what we've been doing over the last 2 years. And I think we're finally at a spot where we're going to be leaving the past behind and going into the future. So, but thank you for that question. Let's let Martin go first, David.
A couple of real quick comments. We were audited, so it went real well. Amy did a good job. And I think that the ability to send scanned documents did make our process go a lot faster. So we're good with that. So my comment is thanks. It seemed to go faster and quicker. Second comment is, so I just got through using NetDMR to upload our stormwater monitoring data. When you're beta testing, you know how complex the pretreatment end report is. Please don't forget to focus on things like the formatting and the nuances of getting all that data in. The other thing I'd ask is look and see if there's a tool where we can upload things. Like I use, an Excel spreadsheet to try to track all those numbers and things. So if I can upload data, it'll make it a lot faster. So we'd appreciate you looking at that, because every time we go in that DMR, something's changed every year, and it's always, we'll submit it 12 or 13 times with 300 lines of errors, and it takes 3 days to get through it. So I can imagine what it's going to be like with this. So, when you beta test it, really look at those. Appreciate it. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Martin, for that feedback. Yeah, great points. And Bridget, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that some of our control authorities will have the ability to do some beta testing as well.
Yeah, the EPA contacts indicate anyone who wants to. Even right now, I have access, even though we're not using it. I can go in there and look at it. So they've been pretty open with, having more people in there messing around with it. But definitely when Texas starts working with them, for sure, we'll want a lot more feedback. But.
Yeah, and we'll send out a notification. But yeah, Martin, that's great feedback and stuff that we definitely want to consider on the front end versus, the back end, and we're stuck with it. Great. Thank you. David.
Yeah, that reminded me of I'm David James. That reminded me of a question regarding once a program modification is approved, it's in the permit gets issued. What is the current TCEQ thinking about when the programs need to have those new modifications fully implemented? In other words, maybe there's some changes with the number of inspection frequencies or whatever. Is there kind of like a rule of thumb? Because I think it would be unrealistic for a program to have to immediately have everything implemented. So would there be, anyway, that's my question.
That's a good question. I don't think I've ever thought about it like in real time like that. I mean, once, the new program or the modification is approved on the local level by council and it's part of your program, that, has to go ahead to officially, that is your program now. That is what you should be following. So I think it's just a matter of, at that point, I think a program should be ready to implement at that point, because we'll have, you'll have been talking to us for months at that point, so I was after council approval, I would say pretty immediate. And if there's any questions or any nuances to a specific situation, certainly reach out to us. But yeah.
The reason I asked that question was in the past life that I had, we had some programs where things were approved and like within a month or two an audit got scheduled. That wasn't really intended, but it happened. And so then there's a question from the auditor's perspective,
right.
How, which are they looking at, the old program or the new program? So yeah, I would just recommend that some consideration be given to
Okay.
that time period once the program is approved through the permit action. So,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, for example, if we have had a similar kind of come up where, oh, they recently had a modification and we're about to go audit them. Obviously, the scope of our audit, they're gonna be using the old permit template, the old application, so we would keep that in mind. But we would also ask, what has the program done to start changing that over? Or, oh, this is, our stack of permits that our mayor just needs to sign and then they all get issued out. So we do take that into consideration when we're auditing, especially when it lines up. We'll consider that and the scope of what we're looking at.
Oh, that's good news. Thank you.
Any other questions? Nothing from Abigail. Them? All right, everyone. Well, if nobody has any other questions or topics of discussion to pose, before we adjourn, I did just want to quickly remind everyone of some action items that you can be doing, in regards to the meat and poultry rule revision. That public comment period is ongoing. There will be the public hearing that you can attend online next week. The PFAS POTW influence study is still, being finalized. So, we hope to be able to provide more information, certainly at TCEQ Trade Fair this spring. But keep an eye out. There will be a public comment period for that study as well. And then if you would like to present at our Region 6 workshop coming up in July, please don't forget to submit your abstracts. We would love to hear from you guys, hear from our programs. If you have any questions on how to get that submitted, please reach out to us. We can walk you through it. And then one last thing, if you somehow made it in without signing in the back room, if you would just filter out that way and get signed in so we could have a record that you were here, that would be great. But that's all we've got. We appreciate everybody making the trip here. Thank you.